Hello and welcome everyone, Ethys here, and today as promised, we're going to try to unravel one of Heaven's Ward's great mysteries, the identity of Unukalhai. Before 3.2 and our confrontation with the ancient Mercidian fiend Sephiroth, there were very few clues offered to us regarding the identity of this enigmatic child. There was his knowledge of ancient Allag and the icons, the fact that he so conspicuously hides his face, his acquaintance with Urianger or Gurelt, and finally, his peculiar name. So first of all, let's think of the people we know to have some special knowledge or particular interest in ancient Allagan technology. We have the Garleans, the Garleans, the Ascians, the Sons of Saint Koinak, ancient Allagan clones, one Mikote infused with the blood of ancient Allag royalty, Teleji Adeleji and subsequently Ilberd, Tiamat, ancient Mercidians, Gigas, and the Warrior of Light. Of the groups we know to have a cause or precedent to hide their faces, there are the Goblins, whom I believe we can shelf as a suspect for the time being, the Ascians and their servants, whom appear to adorn themselves not to hide their identity but to announce it, descendants or clones of Allagan royalty that might wish to hide the telling features of their crimson eyes, and the Garleans, which would pass off as Hyur but for their conspicuous third eye. The usual reasons for the Ascians masking themselves aside, it is conceivable that one might wish to deceive and coerce us, and given what we have seen of Urianger recently, any new acquaintance of his should be treated with extreme suspicion. But the fact remains that the Warrior of Light can smell an Ascian sneaking up on them from a mile away, as presumably can Kryl and anyone else with the Echo. An Ascian would have to employ far greater measures to deceive us, and if they were to do so, such a blatant and inelegant tell as a mask would be completely redundant. As for Allagan royalty, the two which we encountered in the Crystal Tower series, Une and Doga, were not eager to announce their true nature to anyone and everyone they encountered, but nor were they much concerned with taking measures to hide it. There are very few people in the realm that would suspect them to be anything other than Hyur by just the colour of their eyes. Naturally, the Garleans and the Warrior of Light might be exceptions here, but Une and Doga felt no reason to hide themselves from us. And so there is nothing about Unukalhai doing so that is precedented behaviour for an Allagan clone. There would have to be a secondary motive for this deception. He would not be hiding from us just because he is an Allagan. It also seems unlikely to me that an Allagan would require the assistance of a student of Baldessian in operating the verification node required to reach the containment bay. Finally, we have a very recent precedent for the Garleans, but it is not necessary, of course, for a Garlean to cover their entire face for this purpose. A tiara, headband, or a hat would more than suffice. Furthermore, we recently witnessed Unukalhai preparing to channel ether into a spell, which is, as far as we know, impossible for a pure-blood Garlean, assuming he wasn't bluffing. That Unukalhai is either Allagan or Garlean then might seem for now the most likely, but neither theory is without flaw. Regarding the name, Unukalhai or Alpha Serpentis is the brightest star in the head of the Serpens constellation. The popular theory of association between Unukalhai and Elidibus is based on their proximity in astronomy. Elidibus in Final Fantasy Tactics holds the stone Serpentarius, an old name for Ophiuchus, the serpent-bearer constellation which grasps the neck of serpents in whose head Unukalhai gleams in defiance. Subsequently, many people have suspected a relationship between Unukalhai and Elidibus in Eorzea, that the former might be a servant or an avatar that the Ascian has possessed via the Echo. However, as I've already mentioned, this would be something likely impossible to hide for long from either the Warrior of Light or Kryl Baldessian. I still believe all the same that it is fruitful to posit a relationship of some kind between Unukalhai and the Ascians, but it is not self-evidently one of master and servant, and certainly not one of a willing and placid servitude. The relationship between Elidibus and Unukalhai is adversarial, if anything. This Ascian holds and commands the figure which strangles the snake. Perhaps the snake intends to strike back. Of course, we have not the time here or anywhere to notate every single person that has been wronged by an Ascian, so this evidence is once again rather limited. All I can offer you is a story into which all of these pieces fit, one which explains everything we've seen of Unukalhai and everything that has been set up in front of him by the story of these ancient icons so far. When Unukalhai is confronted by the Imperial Legatus Regular Van Hydrus, he tells us that he mistook a shadow for a man. This is no empty insult. Hydrus is a blunt instrument, a dogmatic puppet of Garlemald compared to the previous visionary and maverick regent of occupied Eorzea. Gaius van Belsar was demonstrably not megalomaniac. All violence and power was a means in his eyes to peace and stability, and he placed his own ideals above Garlean policy. He helped to undermine Nail Van Darnus' Meteor project, despite it being officially sanctioned by the Emperor. He promoted soldiers of occupied foreign lands over Garlean nationals, and he respected and admired virtue even in his enemies. He expressed a kind of solidarity with the peoples of Eorzea, thinking of them not as slaves or savages, but as wayward children at risk that needed to be guided and nurtured. So although at first glance the two might seem nearly identical, the truth is that regular Van Hydrus is naught but a shadow of Gaius van Belsar. Belsar first occupied Alamigo with an almost bloodless invasion in 1557, over 25 years ago. So Garlean Alamigo is not recent news. An entire generation of Alamegans have grown up completely assimilated, and over this time so far removed from Ilzabard and the imperial court and politics, it is not hard to imagine that Belsar came to think of his little corner of Eorzea as home. Nor is it difficult to imagine that after a decade or so he might have found a quiet moment to father a child. He had no qualms with taking a mistress in Livia Sastunius, and we have no reason to assume that she was the first and only. Let us just for a moment entertain this hypothetical. If Gaius did propagate a child in Alamigo, he would have many reasons to keep it hidden. Such fraternization would surely be in breach of his military commission, particularly if it was fraternization with a local Alamegan woman, and the knowledge of a child would provide opportunities to many of his enemies and rivals, both in the Alamegan resistance and among the more ambitious of his own officers. In this hypothetical, we have an illegitimate son, perhaps 15 years of age by now. He is Garlean, but not of the pure blood that would impede his ability to channel ether. His heritage and identity has ever been a closely guarded secret, so the child is well used to this particular kind of deception. He sees enough of his father between campaigns to have a relationship free of resentment, but little enough that the man is still a figure of myth and one treated with reverence. His father taught him many things. Of history, of Alig, and of how they solved the primal threat by containing them as sources of power enough to run cities and mobilize indefatigable weapons, and how they ushered in centuries of peace and security. The boy eventually learns that every virtue in his father has been maligned and abused by an Ascian that soon destroyed him and all of his dreams, but the boy was too young and too weak to save him. If only I had possessed such strength, he says. Could he mean the strength to have prevented La Habrea's grip on Belsar, to have disabled Ultima before it destroyed his father's dreams and possibly his life? There are a few ways that the boy could have learned of Gaius' fate. Firstly, that Gaius survived and told him personally of the arduous lesson he had learned from his overleaping ambition. The living Gaius could well be this master to which Unukalhai refers. Alternatively, Unukalhai could have experienced the journey of Gaius via the Echo. He assures us that he is immune to primal influence, so he either possesses the Echo himself, has been claimed by another primal or Ascian, or has developed some yet unknown means of resisting being tempered. I think that it is well within the realm of possibility that this child is touched by the Echo. In this situation, his master might simply be a concession that he's still guided by the old lessons of his father and Unukalhai's own desire to redeem him. Either way, he has taken it upon himself to prevent the further corruption of old Allagan weapons on contemporary fools, donned a mask to hide his Garlean countenance, and given himself the name Unukalhai to declare his defiance of the Ascian's strangling grip. So am I convinced that Unukalhai is in fact the prodigal son of Gaius van Belsar? No. He could have any number of possible backgrounds, but I think that this one here is the most compelling from what we know so far, and let's be real, it makes for a fascinating new character and a damn good story. Cryle senses under that mask a longing for hope, an appetite for power, a lingering sense of regret, and do I detect a desire to test your strength against a certain hero? What exactly this means, only time will tell. Until then, thank you for watching, Please leave your thoughts below and like and subscribe for more.